Hello and welcome to the Rogers Brief. I'm Adam Rogers. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Today was day 72 of the Mass Casualty Commission proceedings, and today was the first day for closing submissions by the participants. And closing submissions are a big part of an inquiry. This is an opportunity for each of the participants to summarize what we've heard, summarize the evidence from their client's perspective. And it's a key time to put forward the particular recommendations that are most important from your client's perspective. Now, there were 4 speakers today, and there's time limits on these closing submissions, and they are limits, I can tell you. With the Desmond inquiry, we were given an hour to speak and 40 pages for a brief. Now, an hour might seem like a long time to speak, but I probably had 4 or 5 hours worth of material that you gather up as submissions over the course of a few years. There's many days and weeks of hearing, so there's lots you want to say about every single issue that comes along. But you can't. You have to choose carefully what you're going to say. So as we're watching the closing submissions today and throughout the week, because there's 3 more days of closing submissions from all of the various participants. Well, most of them. I'm going to come to that in a second. So all of their words are very carefully chosen. If they say anything, any kind of a sentence, any kind of, a remark on a particular, a take on a piece of evidence, those words have been very carefully chosen. I'm sure I had over 200 pages of more or less finished written material to condense into to 40 pages and an hour's worth of speaking. So, you do a few things. One is you find out, you think about what are the most important issues for your client, but also you think about, all right, well, this is an issue that's important, but I'm very sure, or you may be quite certain that somebody else is going to cover it. It might be more important to their client, so you can count on somebody else doing a thorough job of that. And if you trust their viewpoint as well to align with yours, then sometimes you can skip topics for those reasons. But there's a lot of choices that go into every paragraph, every sentence. Now, so it's very important and a lot of work goes into it. But is it important in this case? Well, it's not so clear because, of course, we've been watching the Mass Casualty Commission, and it looks like, they seem to think that at least that they have it figured out for themselves anyway. And in some ways, these closing submissions are more of an exercise of allowing the participants to have their say. All right, here's your chance. You have some time. Say whatever you want, rather than a real chance to look for insightful points that might affect the final conclusions and recommendations, the report of the commissioners. I noticed today, for example, that the commissioners didn't ask any questions after the submissions. There was nothing that was like, oh, wait, you said this, but, what about, there was no back and forth after the submissions as one might expect, and certainly what we saw from Judge Zimmer in the Desmond inquiry. So the other thing about these closing submissions is they're usually quite predictable, all right, because you've been watching the parties throughout the proceedings. You've had a chance to see them cross-examine all the witnesses, and so you have a sense of their perspective on many, if not most, of the issues. Not so clear here, where there's been limited cross-examination and real marginalization of the participants. So wasn't 100% sure what to expect from some of the people today. So who we heard from today, we heard from Patterson Law, who represents most of the family participants, from Sandra McCullough from Patterson, Josh Bryson, and we've heard from Tara Miller, and then we heard from Tara Long, who is a self-represented participant. That's the sister of Aaron Tuck. So who we didn't hear from, and we're not going to hear from this week, which is quite unusual in inquiry terms, we're not going to hear from Commission Counsel. Normally, in an inquiry, the inquiry counsel would be the ones that would lead off closing submissions, not be limited to an hour either, but give a thorough sort of overview of everything we've learned so far. I want to read something. This is just a paragraph long, and this is from The Conduct of Public Inquiries by Professor Edward Tushney Ottawa University professor. If you've been watching closely or watching the news on the Mass Casualty Commission, you may be familiar with his name. He's an expert. He's written, the sort of seminal Canadian textbook on inquiries in Canada. So here's the commentary during a paragraph on the role of counsel, and particularly the role of Commission Counsel. So he says, one of the advantages of bifurcation of the roles of Commission Counsel. So, all right, I should stop there. Bifurcation, that means that there is two kinds of counsel. There's the counsel that's asking questions and going through each witness, and then there's separate advisory counsel that are advising the commissioners on legal issues. And that is the case with the Mass Casualty Commission. They have lawyers that are doing one or the other. So one of the advantages is for the commissioner to receive comprehensive and detailed submissions from Commission Counsel at the conclusion of the hearings. The parties granted standing have a substantial and direct interest in some aspects of the inquiry's terms of reference, but Commission Counsel, responsible for marshalling the evidence and managing the hearings, represents the public interest with respect to all aspects. No other person has the same comprehensive and intimate knowledge of all of the evidence and witnesses and their interrelationships. Her written submissions can provide a blueprint for the Commissioner's final report, subject, of course, to contrary or modifying submissions made by parties with more specific interests. The latter provides a useful counterbalance for the Commissioner in weighing the former. So he continues, Hearings Counsel has considerable freedom and latitude to suggest specific findings and conclusions. However, as one of the Commission Counsel, the objectivity of the Commission will be enhanced if such submissions are not urged upon the Commissioner. Instead, potential conclusions should be identified together with alternatives and the relative merits of each. Okay, so what's that saying? It is saying that Commission Counsel should give closing submissions, and they should be going through the entirety of the evidence that's heard, discuss all of the major issues, suggest to the commissioners what's been learned, and then that's sort of the foundation over which every other lawyer or participant can add their submissions, modify, and all this. Happened in the Desmond inquiry, happens in most inquiries, didn't happen in the Mass Casualty Commission. So be interested to hear Commission Counsel explain why they made that decision or who made that decision. Okay, so the submissions today were quite good. I started off with Sandra McCullough from Patterson Law. This was an interesting thing, interesting choice on their part. So because it wasn't Rob Pinio, who would be the senior counsel, or Michael Scott, who we've also seen a considerable amount of him doing a good job with the examination of witnesses. So that was an interesting choice. Now, I will say, in my view at least, Sandra McCullough has distinguished herself during the proceedings, and I think this is going to go a long way to further her career in law in Nova Scotia, and I think she's done herself a lot of credit. A discussion like that, I'm sure, would have taken place, of course, as to who's going to be the lawyer that does the closing submissions. It's a prominent position. It's the lead-off submissions. Of course, the clients would have had some input in that as well, so just something I noted. Now, she points out, she does give quite a comprehensive examination of the relevant issues, and talks about the RCMP issues, that they're not just about money. There's command structure confusion. They didn't use GPS. They didn't learn anything from community members, even though there was lots of information that was available to them. There was no public warnings. They covered all that. And the bare minimum squad. Now, this is an interesting thing. I've been thinking about this as I've been writing my own final report, about only one team being sent in, and the lack of aggression at that early stage and how that influenced subsequent events. But the bare minimum IARD squad going into Portapique, no air support and no plan for backup, no engagement with Truro Police, and attributes all of this to a tunnel vision that the police had, going by what they assumed is the most likely, I guess, scenario, given the little bit of information they had, instead of actually just listening to what they were being told and trusting what they were being told. So failure of preparedness, and then compounded on that a failure to acknowledge mistakes. So at one point she said there was Wortman was on the radar, on the police radar, but that radar was turned off effectively. So there was no real investigation of him prior to the events of the mass casualty. So that's interesting from a few perspectives. One is that there's no, I guess, suggestion from Patterson. They're not making the suggestion that there was some connection between Wortman and the police that we're just still not learning about. Ms. McCullough also talked about the Mass Casualty Commission itself, their processes, the weaknesses in the evidentiary record. Statements have not been, routine things. Statements have not been adopted by witnesses. She covered the lack of cross-examination on Staff Sergeants Rayhill and O'Brien and Lisa Banfield. And then talked about the Federal Department of Justice and all the issues with disclosure. We heard from Chris Leather about issues that he had. He was told not to volunteer information. Lots of redactions, late disclosure on Lee Bergerman's and Brenda Lucky's notes. And there wasn't even an organization chart provided by the RCMP, even though Brenda Lucky made it. Well, she suggested that one most certainly exists. And then another thing that I've been thinking about is that, clients, the family members were never asked to give their stories, and they feel like, they haven't been put on, I guess, she didn't put it this way, Ms. McCullough, but they haven't been put on center stage here to talk about their family members and explain who these people were. And, I think that's a major failing, actually, of the inquiry itself, not to provide a forum for these family members to talk about their loved ones. So, she got a good, she feels that, and this is a good point as well, that her clients have been maligned in part by James Lockyer, Lisa Banfield's lawyer, as sort of conspiracy theorists because they wanted to cross-examine Miss Banfield. Comparing them with Sandy Hook conspiracy theorists and all of this. So, again, no reaction to any of this by the commissioners, but that was Miss McCullough's submissions. Quite well done by her. Josh Bryson also did quite well. Everybody did today. He was talking about the IR team as well. Brief talking about Josh Bryson's... and he talked about Sergeant O'Brien giving the orders while consuming alcohol and how inappropriate that was. He said, he made the comparison, if he had come in this morning consuming alcohol, what would that have looked like? And, or going to court any day, or if anybody. So it's inappropriate for Sergeant O'Brien to have done that. Tara Miller was next, talking about the time and the bureaucracy involved in issuing a tweet. How there was 2 hours and 7 people to just send out a tweet, and how still they couldn't get accurate information. Kristen Beaton's case in particular, she was scanning social media. She was trying to find out whatever she could. So, if any information had been provided in a timely manner, her life certainly would have been saved. And then, so she was looking for information, but the RCMP were not disclosing anything publicly. Ms. Miller also talked about the lack of checkpoints around Truro and how cooperation, interoperability issues with Truro police certainly may have contributed to that lack of, setting that checkpoint where there was a real choke point as well in highways going, from Portapique in through to get towards Halifax. So wouldn't have been the most difficult thing to set up some checkpoints there and keep the roads under observation. All right, last speaker today was Tara Long. Ms. Long, like I said, is the sister of Aaron Tuck. I take it from the early moments of her submissions that there's some serious troubles going on in the family, relationship breakdowns and such. There was an objection made when she alluded to any connection between herself and Ms. Oliver, Jolene Oliver. And so, anyway, that's unfortunate when tragic events like this are compounded by further family turmoil, as unfortunately can sometimes happen. Nice thing about a self-represented litigant is that they don't have the same kind of filters that lawyers have, and so they just say things. And Miss Long certainly did. She talked about how the Griffin family was evacuated the night before, but nobody even had gone to check on the Tuck residents in Cobequid Court down that way. And then, she said, yeah, Heidi Stevenson's a hero, but, the RCMP were having a parade for her while the Tucks were still lying dead in the home. So that's, anyway, it's something worth saying. And I thought much of what Ms. Long said today was worth saying, and good for it to be said out in public, finally, in a sense. So anyway, that was it today. So it's the biggest thing, well, other than the quality of the submissions, which I thought was quite high, biggest thing today is that we're not going to hear, it seems like, from the Mass Casualty Commission lawyers themselves. And that's a major flaw in the commission process, something that is contrary to expert opinion on the subject and contrary to common practice in Nova Scotia inquiries. So be interested to hear any explanation on that is offered. All right, well, that's it for today, day 72 of the Mass Casualty Commission proceedings. I'll be back tomorrow to see the further submissions, and we'll be reporting back to you thereafter. So thanks again for watching, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.